Hi, I'm really excited to bring this Christ Revealed interview to you. Let's go ahead and jump in.
You know, when you work a crime scene, you typically get an idea of who your suspect is before you really ever meet that person. Because there's the stuff in the scene is accountable. I mean, you're going to basically attribute this stuff to your suspect. Or if it's not to your suspect, other people who have been in the scene. But if you can isolate the stuff that's in the scene, that you know your suspect deposited there, it's going to tell you something. Even where the crime occurred is going to, because some people would maybe not know how to get here to this location to do the crime here. So you can actually start to narrow down and do what we call a suspect profile. And basically all we're doing is we're saying, okay, given the that piece of evidence, the only way that can get there is if that person who did this is like X. And that piece of evidence, he must or she must also be like Y. Because you're starting to shape together what kind of person could account for the stuff we're seeing in the scene. And so at some point, that's something that I had to do also, right? I just needed to know, I had stuff I thought was in the universe that had to be explained. I've already described some of that, right? The beginning of the universe, the fine-tuning of the universe, the appearance of life in the universe, the appearance of design and biology, consciousness, free agency, morality, objective moral truths, and even evil has to be accounted for. But you have to have a standard. So what we're really looking for is what is the standard by which we call something evil? Okay. That stuff has to be in the universe. It has to be explained. And whatever explains it, if it's one suspect that can explain all of it, that's going to give us a pretty robust picture. We're looking for something. This is why I thought that a personal agent was the best explanation for the beginning. We're looking for something that is powerful enough to blink everything into existence from nothing, and is therefore not part of the something that is creating. It's not spatial, temporal, or material. It's uncaused. And by the way, everyone's looking for the uncaused first cause, not just the theist. If you think it's a multiverse generator that's created the universes, and ours is one of those, well, that you probably believe that multiverse generator is uncaused. So to ask who created your creator is no better than saying, well, what caused your uncaused multiverse generator? We're all in that same boat. So we're looking for something uncaused that's non-spatial, non-temporal, non-material, but it also is concerned about an end goal and has therefore fine-tuned the universe in just a certain way that allows for life to emerge. It doesn't have to be this way. So we're looking for something that seems to be purposeful and has the ability to fine-tune the elements and the conditions in such a way. We're also looking for something that accounts for the origin of life. And the most key ingredient about that, of course, is the genetic code. We see information in the genetic code. We have no way to explain information by our common experience or by any scientific process from purely physics. You can get some kind of information from physics and chemistry, but you can't get the kind of information we see in DNA. That's a very high level of information, and we only in our common experience can attribute that to intelligence. But that would mean the ability to decide between all. We're looking at a personal, intelligent being because that agent is deciding between alternatives. That's what information is. It's the selection between alternatives. Then you're looking for the appearance of design. Well, now we're looking for something that actually has the ability to design. And we typically, the ID movement banks on this idea that there's an intelligent designer. So now we're looking for 4 characteristics. Plus, it appears to be a mind that is creating in its own image, which is why we can account for something more than our brain. We account for our immaterial consciousness. If there's a conscious being that is designing in its image, that might explain why we have consciousness. And we have free agency. We're sitting here thinking about this right now. It's not predestined for us to conclude our conclusions. We actually can change our mind, but you can't change your brain. That would be a series of events that are entirely physical. You can't control. You arrive at this conclusion because your neurons have fired in this way, and that started at the beginning of the universe, and all those dominoes have been falling in a certain way all that time, and you don't even have free agency. And that's why people who are consistent, like Sam Harris, a consistent atheist who's a neuroscientist, he denies free agency of this kind because he knows that you have to be a series of physical events in your brain. But we seem to experience free agency. If there's a mind that can choose freely and design what we see in biology and creates in its image, we might also possess minds that can choose freely. Again, we have a better explanation. And there's last 2 things, objective moral truths. Well, we believe there are some objective moral. It's never okay to torture babies for fun. That's an objective claim that doesn't change no matter where you are in history or where you are on the planet. If there's a Star Trek universe, it's not okay to torture Klingon babies for fun. This is an objective, transcendent moral obligation. We know that all obligations are between persons. So now we're looking for the source, that is an objective, transcendent, moral person. Again, a better explanation is personal rather than impersonal. And finally, we're looking for a standard of good by which we could all agree that when we see the shadow from the sunlight, that's evil. You got to have that standard of sunlight that we all agree on. And so again, we're looking for a source, an objective source of good. And I think that Dawkins says it best when he says that if the universe is simply a collection of physical processes, there is no good or evil, just blind, pitiless indifference. Yet we think there is good and evil. How do you ground that? So I looked at that entire collection of evidences and realizing I need a non-spatial, non-material, non-temporal being that could fine-tune and was intelligent enough to provide information in DNA and could design as a designer and has a conscious mind that can choose freely and has got the source of all moral standards, including the standard of righteousness that by which we call anything evil. Well, what am I looking at here? Isn't that the classic definition that we have been using for God for eons? Yes. So I realized the best explanation. Now, of course, that doesn't mean Christianity is true. And that's why I spent so much time on the resurrection. Because if we're looking for the one system that actually gives us a picture of that God, if Jesus rose from the grave, that would change everything. I have a tendency to believe people who rise from the grave. So I think I was stuck with the narrative that Jesus provided because he demonstrated his authority from the resurrection. And that's where I ended up saying, okay, it's time to make a decision.
Thanks so much for joining us for this interview, for taking this Christ Revealed journey with us. Remember, if you haven't already, subscribe. That way you'll get notified about all the new content that's coming down the road. Comment. People want to hear from you, and then maybe you'll encourage somebody else to make a comment. If you did like it so other people know that it's something good for them to watch. And finally, share this. Send links to other people that you know and care about. Cost you nothing but maybe a few seconds of your time, but it might have a massive impact on their life. Anyway, really excited to be able to share this information with you. Thanks for tuning in.